President, I ask unanimous consent to call the quorum be terminated.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that upon disposition of S. 1789, but no earlier than Wednesday, April 25th, Senate adopt the motion to proceed to consideration of calendar number 312, S. 1925.
Without objection, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent that the Senate now proceed to a period of morning business. Senators allowed to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
There's a bill at the desk. I ask for its first reading.
Clerk will read the bill for the first time.
As 2338, a bill to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act of 1994.
I now ask for second reading in order to place the bill on the calendar, but I object to my own request.
Objection is heard.
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate
The bill will be read for the second time on the next legislative day.
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business day, the Senate recess until Tuesday, April 24th at 10 a.m. Following the prayer and the pledge, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, and time for the two leaders be reserved for the use later in the day. That the Senate resume consideration of the motion to proceed S. 1925, and that at 10:30 a.m. the Senate resume consideration of the motion to proceed S. J-Res 36, and at 12:30 p.m. the Senate resume consideration of the motion to proceed to S. 1925. Further, the Senate recess from 12:50 until 2:15 p.m. to allow for weekly caucus meetings. Finally, at 2:15 p.m., the Senate resume consideration of the motion to proceed to S.J. Res 36.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, the first vote will be at 2:15 tomorrow on the motion to proceed to S.J. Res 36. If that motion is defeated, there will be several votes in order to complete action on the postal reform bill at 2:15 p.m. If there's no further business come before the Senate, I ask that recess under the previous order.
The Senate stands in recess until 10 a.m. tomorrow.
So the Senate's gavelled out, but earlier today members approved the confirmation of a state judge to a federal district court in Missouri. The chamber also continues work on the Violence Against Women's Act, which expires later this year. Tuesday, senators could complete a bill that overhauls the U.S. Postal Service. They'll consider over 30 amendments to the bill starting tomorrow afternoon, with passage of the bill requiring 60 votes. Live Senate coverage continues here on C-SPAN 2 when members gavel back in. And to find out more about the Senate and the 112th Congress, the 2012 Congressional Directory is available from cspan.org. Learn about each member of the House and Senate, including contact information. You'll also find district maps and committee assignments. Pick up a copy for $12.95 plus shipping and handling. Order online at cspan.org/shop.
There's room for positive government policy. It's the private sector that drives development. It's the private sector that really fuels it. But always in our history we've had some vision of where we're going and some encouragement, some policy by the government. And if ever we needed that, it's right now when we have this imposing and opportunity-creating infrastructure of the 21st century.
Tonight, former member of the Federal Communications Commission, Michael Copps, on legislation to reform the FCC, consolidation in the telecommunications industry, and the state of the media at 8 Eastern on the Communicators on C-SPAN 2.
This year's Student Camp video competition asked students to create a video telling us what part of the Constitution is most important to them and why. Today, we'll take you to Cherry Hill, New Jersey to talk with second prize winner Madeline Bound. She's an 8th grader at Carusi Middle School. Hi, Madeline.
Hi.
Why did you choose women's suffrage as your topic?
I had considered actually doing the First Amendment for my documentary. However, I felt that, the 19th Amendment and women's suffrage was a topic that I would be able to do well. It was also a matter of what resources I had, as I had chosen my topic around the same time my parents had decided we would take our summer vacation up in the Finger Lakes which is near the Seneca Falls, which is where the first women's rights convention was held.
So why don't you think the Founding Fathers included women's suffrage as part of the original Constitution?
Well, at the time when the Constitution was being created, women's rights was, a radical idea. And at the time, there were a lot of already some controversial issues that were being brought up, such as slavery, for example. And these issues really threatened the creation of the Constitution. So, the introduction of women's suffrage would not have gone over well. So I know while, there were some that might have supported women's suffrage at the time, it was such a controversial, such a radical issue that it wouldn't have, gone over well.
There were a couple of leaders in the women's rights movement. Can you tell us, who was Susan B. Anthony? What was her role?
Susan B. Anthony played a significant role in the women's suffrage movement during the 19th century. She founded the National Women's Suffrage Association, and she wrote what is now the 19th Amendment. She dedicated her life to women's suffrage, along with her friend Elizabeth Stanton, and she held demonstrations, she gave speeches, and she played a pivotal part in the women's suffrage movement.
And who was Alice Paul?
Alice Paul dedicated her life to the women's suffrage movement during the 20th century, and she organized the march held on the day of President Woodrow Wilson's inauguration. And she created the National Women's Party. She held demonstrations and she picketed outside the White House. And she won the sympathy of the nation as women were arrested and brutally abused in prison. And then when the 19th Amendment was passed, she continued fighting for women's rights with the Equal Rights Amendment, which did not pass in Congress.
What were some of the other things that women did in order to fight for their right to vote?
Well, during the 19th century, it was largely conventions and speeches. They traveled over the country. So in the 20th century, it got much more militant. While it was, peaceful, it was much more not as passive.
What do you think we can learn from the women's rights movement today?
I think we can learn that one person or a small group of people with great conviction in their cause can make a change to an entire nation. When we learn about the women's rights movement, we begin to see, the parallels between the women's rights movement and the civil rights movement, because, Susan B. Anthony had said, resistance to tyranny is obedience to God, which is very similar to Martin Luther King's quote, non-cooperation with evil is as much more obligation as cooperation with the good. So, you begin to see the parallels in the successful strategies that were involved, such as the peaceful resistance, the nonviolence.
Thank you, Madeline, and congratulations again on your win.
Thank you.
And here's a brief portion from Madeline's documentary titled Votes for Women.
In 1872, Anthony voted. She argued the 14th Amendment enabled her to vote. She was later jailed, and her trial received national attention. Despite her logical defense, she was charged with illegal voting. If she had won, women would have been able to vote under the 14th Amendment.
The 14th Amendment did not only not include the women, but it specifically excluded them. The word men appear in the Constitution, but the women argued that it referred to people as a species. But in the 14th Amendment, the word male appears, which undeniably refers to the gender.
Well, the women's movement was largely diverse, and they didn't have a unified voice. They didn't work together. There were differing opinions and different personalities.
Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Stanton formed the National Women's Suffrage Association, whose strategy was to attain women's suffrage through an amendment to the federal Constitution. Henry Blackwell and Lucy Stone formed the American Women's Suffrage Association, whose strategy was to attain women's suffrage through amendments to individual state constitutions.
You can see this entire video as well as all of the winning documentaries at studentcam.org and continue the conversation on C-SPAN's Facebook and Twitter pages.
In his new book, The Riot Within, Rodney King recounts his life in the days and years following the video recording of his beating by the Los Angeles police on March 3, 1991. Mr. King looks back at the riots that occurred after the acquittal of 4 officers and talks about his own legal problems and alcohol addiction. See his comments live Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on booktv.org. Earlier today, Maine Senator Susan Collins came to the Senate floor to talk about changes to the U.S. Postal Service. She said she believes there's no transfer of taxpayer dollars authorized under the proposed U.S. Postal Service reform bill. Senator Collins currently serves as the ranking member of the Governmental Affairs Committee. It's 40 minutes.
Mr. President, let me start by responding to the ranking member of the Budget Committee by saying that I could not agree with him more that it is absolutely unacceptable that we have not had a budget pass in the Senate for more than 1,000 days. That is totally unacceptable. It's one of the reasons that we are in such a financial crisis in this country. So I completely agree with Senator Sessions that we should be doing a budget resolution on the Senate floor, and I wholeheartedly agree with his comments that it is absolutely irresponsible for us to be proceeding without a budget resolution. And as a member of the Appropriations Committee, I would say to my colleagues that it makes it very difficult for us to carry out our work due to the cooperation of the chairman and ranking member of that committee. We are operating under allocations for each subcommittee, but it would be far, far preferable if there were a budget resolution that passed, and it should have passed last year, the year before, and it should be passing this year. So we're in complete agreement on that point, and I know that's been a great source of frustration for the senator from Alabama as the ranking member of the Budget Committee. Having said that, Mr. President, let me explain a few facts. First of all, there are no tax dollars being authorized by this reform bill. There is no transfer of taxpayer money to the Postal Service. What we have here is a very strange and unusual budget situation. And the score that CBO has is incredibly misleading because the Postal Service, oddly enough, is part of the unified budget of the United States, even though most of its accounts are off budget. But it participates in federal employee retirement systems and the health benefit systems and the workers' compensation systems, where postal dollars that come from postal employees and from ratepayers, postal ratepayers, are commingled, if you will, with tax dollars that come from other federal agencies into the retirement system, the workers' comp system, and the health benefit system. And that creates this odd situation, which makes it very difficult for CBO to score this bill correctly. Now, the Inspector General of the Postal Service puts it far more bluntly. The Inspector General says in a February 22nd report from this year called Budget Enforcement Procedures and the Postal Service, and let me quote, the IG says, the Postal Service's off-budget status exposes the Postal Service to, quote, an inappropriate and illogical application of the scoring process that threatens its ability to reform and heal its financial condition. Scoring and budget enforcement were created for a good purpose, but they are undermined when the scoring process assumes that unlikely or inappropriate inflows to the Treasury must occur, end quote. Let me give you a couple of examples because it's incredibly important that we walk through the score so that our colleagues can understand the unique on-budget, off-budget status of the Postal Service, particularly in the area of reducing payments to retiree health benefits or recovering overpayments to the FERS system, and how the CBO scoring method obscures the true savings achieved by refunding the FERS payments. Now, again, let me repeat. Since 1971, the Postal Service has received no federal subsidy to operate other than some very minor appropriated dollars for functions that the Postal Service is legislatively mandated to do, such as Mail for the Blind and overseas ballots for our troops. That's it. Prior to 1971, there was a taxpayer subsidy year after year to the Postal Service. That ended with the Postal Reform Act in that year. So from the sale of stamps, the cost of shipping packages, the rates that mailers and magazine publishers, newspaper publishers pay to get the print versions delivered, comes the revenue for the Postal Service. And even the money that the Postal Service uses for retiree benefits comes from the combination of the contributions the postal workers make and the money that the Postal Service invests. So there is, as I mentioned earlier, a significant overpayment into the federal employees' retirement system. And we, along with the administration, the GAO, the independent actuaries, the Postal Service Inspector General, all have proposed that that overpayment be returned to the Postal Service. And it would be used in part to finance these buyouts and retirement incentives to reduce the size of the postal workforce. Now, let's look at how CBO scores this particular part of the bill. First of all, CBO gives this bill no credit whatsoever for the buyouts, and here's why. CBO argues that the Postal Service already has buyout authority. But, Mr. President, as you know better than anybody in this chamber, our bill changes the status quo in two critical ways. First of all, the Postal Service has no cash right now to do these buyouts. That is one of the reasons that we're so eager to get the money from the overpayment to FERS refunded to the Postal Service. Second, in our bill, in our substitute bill, we specifically direct the Postmaster General to use a portion of this money to entice 18% of the current postal workers to accept this offer. That is a big difference. So there's a mandatory direction to the Postmaster General to reduce the workforce by about 18%, and there's the cash that will allow him to offer buyouts to do that. Now, why CBO doesn't score that as a savings to the Postal Service is beyond me. Now, there's another way to reduce the workforce, and again, the funds for this would come from the FERS refund, and that is our bill provides new authority to the Postal Service to offer 1 or 2 years of credited service toward a pension annuity so that some worker who's just lacking a year or two to reach the number of years necessary for retirement could be credited with that extra year or two of service, depending which retirement system the worker is in. Unfortunately, the CBO makes an assumption that only several thousand employees would take advantage of that offer and credits the bill with savings of only $643 million over 10 years. Since these kinds of service credits have never been offered before, it's not clear how the CBO came up with this assumption. There's no precedent for it. There are no data for the CBO to use. And again, our original bill did not include the hard requirement for the 18% reduction, but our substitute does, and yet CBO does not recognize that change. Now, the Postal Service has told us, as the presiding officer would attest, that these requirements and this new authority and the funds for the buyouts and the service credit would allow them to reduce their workforce in the neighborhood of 100,000 employees and save some $8 billion a year. That is not reflected in the estimate. So I use that example because it shows how strange the scoring is. This is a quirk of the budget scoring rules because when there's a transfer of Postal Service money, not taxpayer money, Postal Service money, from one account in the Treasury, such as the retirement account, into an off-budget postal operations account, the CBO makes this assumption that savings are not going to occur. So, when you transfer the $11 billion overpayment, the refund, from the pension account to which the Postal Service has been overcharged into a postal operating account, it gets credited as $5.5 billion instead of $11 billion. That means an on-budget account loses $11 billion, as CBO looks at it, and the off-budget accounts only gains $5.5 billion. This is very complex because it's so obscure and because, frankly, it's so illogical. The result is a net score in the unified budget of $5.5 billion as a cost to the Treasury. And that simply is not the reality. Again, these aren't taxpayer dollars that went into the overpayment in the first place. So here we have a provision that's being scored as the $5.5 billion cost to the Treasury, when in fact they aren't tax dollars. And it's only because this is a unified budget where some of the accounts are on budget, some of the accounts are off budget, that we have this anomalous result. It just doesn't make sense. Let me give you another example. The CBO acknowledges that our reforms of the federal workers' compensation program would save $1.2 billion. But CBO doesn't count this reduction as a savings because of the way that the Department of Labor charges agencies for participation in the workers' compensation program. Again, that just doesn't make any sense when the CBO itself acknowledges that these are real reforms that are going to save $1.2 billion. Yet we only get credit for $200 million of the reforms. Mr. President, there's another issue here. The CBO does not account for what would happen if the Postal Service allows service to continue to deteriorate. Instead, because the CBO doesn't recognize the reality that all the big mailers and small mailers tell us, which is that revenue will be driven out of the system if the service cuts associated with plant closures and wholesale closures of post offices are allowed to proceed. The bottom line, Mr. President, is that were it not for 50% discounts being applied over and over again to the savings that we achieve for 5-day delivery, retiree health care, the pension refund, on the basis of these strange behavioral assumptions and reflecting the odd combination of off-budget and on-budget accounts being brought together in a unified budget, the bill would have scored approximately $24.6 billion more in off-budget savings, making the bill a net saver of $14.8 billion. This is so frustrating, Mr. President, because it is so complex. But I think if our colleagues just look at the example of the FERS overpayment, it becomes very clear. Because there are no taxpayer dollars involved, and yet it is scored as a cost to the Treasury of $5.5 billion. How can a refund of an overpayment that involved no tax dollars end up being scored as a cost to the Treasury of $5.5 billion? That is how illogical and quirky this estimate is. And it is because of the unique status of the Postal Service and how its various accounts are reflected in the budget. But, Mr. President, in addition to my absolute conviction that this score is very misleading, let me make another point, and that is, if we do not proceed with this bill, if this budget point of order brings down this bill, the Postal Service will not survive as we know it. And again, we are not providing a taxpayer subsidy in this bill. In fact, I would argue we're preventing a taxpayer bailout in this bill. Because later this year, if the Postal Service cannot meet its payroll and thus is unable to deliver mail, I think the pressure for the taxpayer bailout will increase substantially. And I do not want to see us return to the pre-1971 era where the taxpayers were on the hook for the Postal Service. And our bill would avoid that outcome. Thank you, Mr. President.
Those comments from Maine Senator Susan Collins took place on the Senate floor earlier today. And the Senate returns Tuesday.